Well, good morning to some, good afternoon to others, wherever you're joining us from in the country. Today, we are going to be talking about organizational wellness. And this is important because promoting well being creates a healthier, productive, and sustainable workplace. So we are able to be who God has called us to be. We have to remember that as we serve others, we must keep in mind how we are also serving ourselves. It makes me think of the scripture that tells us to love others as we love ourselves. And we know there has to be some focus on the way we are caring for ourselves and our employees. I believe that the development of a culture of well being that is central to organizational wellness is very important to God. And so we got a couple of things that we're going to talk about today. So today we will define organizational wellness. We'll understand why organizational wellness is important. We'll talk about some of the ways that organizational wellness can be implemented. And in the midst of that, explore some common wellness concerns and have opportunity for you to reflect on what your possible needs might be. And then begin to identify some action steps that will take us forward. So if you are taking notes, get your notepad and your pen and your typing of your notes, get yourself ready because we have quite a bit that we're going to talk about today. So to start us off, we want to make sure that we're all on the same page about what wellness is. What is wellness? And some of you may be talking about wellness all the time in your own work. Some of you may be focusing on wellness in your lives. But here we have this definition from the Global Wellness Institute that defines wellness as the active pursuit of activities, choices, and lifestyles that lead to a state of holistic health. And when we think about holistic health, we know that holistic means it's all of these different parts of our lives. And so here is the wellness wheel. And again, some of you may have seen the wellness wheel before. Certainly, if you have been in any of our previous MBA workshops that are talking about our personal wellness, we have talked about this wellness wheel and how important it is that we give attention to the spiritual, the emotional, the intellectual, the physical, the social, the environmental, and the financial aspects of our lives that make up our total wellness, right? And this is not to overwhelm us because sometimes people see this wellness wheel and they say, oh my gosh, we got to put some focus on all of these things. It's not to overwhelm us, but it's just to show us that we have an abundance of ways to care for ourselves and our wellness. And there are many things that we do that touch on multiple areas of wellness at the same time. So when we move to organizational wellness, the Global Wellness Institute defines workplace wellness as any workplace health promotion activity or organizational policy designed to support healthy behavior among employees and to improve health outcomes. So we're shifting from the individual to looking at the organization as a whole. What is the health of that organization? And understanding that the health and the wellness of each person who is playing a role in this organization is going to impact the overall health of the organization. Some of the next generation approaches to wellness, to organizational wellness, should address the organizational environment and culture. We're going to talk a little bit more about culture in a moment. It should offer individual programs to help employees thrive, and it should address holistic well-being across mental, emotional, physical, and spiritual dimensions, and do this work through a comprehensive or integrative approach. So as I said a moment ago, not to overwhelm ourselves that there are so many different areas that we need to bring attention to, but to think about what are some of the things that we can do that offer an integrative approach that is addressing all of these areas of our organization and of our wellness at the same time. And there are ways to do that. So as we focus a little bit more on just these dimensions of organizational wellness, we saw the individual wellness wheel just a moment ago when we talked about that first definition of just what wellness is in general. And the Global Wellness Institute has a dimension, a wheel of workplace wellness. And so looking at the physical, all right, how is the organization operating? What is the environment, the physical environment like? The mental aspect of the organizational wellness. What is the agility and the resilience of the organization, and how people are able to think and move in the organization? There's the financial and performance health, right? How is the organization performing? What is the financial outlook? What is our strategic outlook? Later in our time together, we're going to take a moment to think about the financial aspect and how we are determining wellness when we keep in mind the financial aspect, which can sometimes be a barrier for people to focus on making sure that their organization is well. There's the occupational aspect. So, what is the employee experience? How are the employees performing? Are the employees satisfied? What is the relational aspect of wellness of your organization? What's that culture like? How are people relating to one another? How are they navigating conflict? How are they navigating working together, being creative together? Then we have purpose. What's the leadership style? What's the organizational purpose? Is everybody on the same page about what that purpose is? Do people have the space to really lean into their personal purpose and their goals and how that aligns with the organization's purpose and goals? And then recreational. Are there other opportunities outside of just doing the work for your organization to thrive? Are there learning and development opportunities? Are there, relating back to that relational piece, are there opportunities to just do things together that don't focus so much on just getting the work done? So we have our definition of organizational wellness. We know our dimensions of workplace wellness. And so we're going to move to talking a little bit more about what this looks like as a whole, right? What is this culture like? So there's this quote from Dr. William Fleming, who does some work and research around workplace wellness. And he says workplace well-being refers to how positive an employee feels in their job, which inevitably influences their sense of purpose, belonging, and productivity. And I think we all know this from our own experiences, how well and how positive that we're feeling in our work is going to impact a variety of aspects of our work. It's going to impact our colleagues and so on. So we move into the importance of organizational wellness. Well, organizational wellness, putting a focus on that is important because the most successful organizations, based on research, the most successful organizations have work cultures that embrace flexibility and prioritize employee well-being. They embrace flexibility and they prioritize employee well-being. One of the things that we've seen coming into the pandemic and living in this pandemic informed world is that a lot of organizations have moved more into flexibility and prioritizing employee well-being, because the past several years have shown a lot of people just how important the emphasis needs to be on wellness. And so there's been a lot of research studies that have happened within the past few years about that flexibility and what it looks like to prioritize employee well-being. According to a 2022 study, some of the top 5 aspects of work that employees viewed as very important, which also aligned so much with organizational wellness, they view positive culture being very important, being able to access mental health and well-being benefits, having a sense of purpose or meaning, having flexible work hours. So we see this word flexibility is going to come up a lot when it comes to wellness. Having more than 2 weeks of paid vacation. And in this research study, they had a note there about Gen Z, so Generation Z, and that they chose a couple of different things in their top 5 aspects of work. They had the first 3, so the positive culture, mental health and well-being benefits, and a sense of purpose and meaning. But their last 2 was positive feedback and recognition, and having a manager who will help advance their career. So I think those two really align very much with the relational dimension of organizational wellness, that we're having these good relationships with the people that we're working with their supervisors, with the leadership team, and they are offering positive feedback and recognition. Where are the celebrations? And we'll talk about that. Also, organizational wellness is important because when employees feel connected and they are given the agency to do their best work, the organization thrives. Okay, we read the quote just a moment ago. We just talked about Generation Z, like lifting that up. I want to know that I am doing my best work. This is why we will be able to invest in our work and push the organization forward. Employees who have thriving relationships with their immediate team members reported having better well-being than those who had poor relationships. They also had higher productivity, and they were also less likely to change employers in the year ahead. So again, having an organizational culture in which people feel connected, in which people are belonging. We talk about belonging, equity. That belonging piece is so important for people. Also, workers who feel their identity and perspectives are valued by leadership, we hear a common theme here, have higher rates of psychological safety. And those who feel psychologically safe have fewer bouts of unmanageable stress that contributes to mental health concerns, including having fewer microaggressions. And this is coming from some research that Mental Health America has done on workplace mental health. So we want to make sure that in this organizational wellness, we're making sure that people feel mentally safe. They feel psychologically safe, that they're not having multiple experiences with unmanageable stress, because then that's going to cause their mental health to decline, right, outside of work. And that's going to impact how they're able to get their work done. In addition to microaggressions here, we want to make sure that in these workplaces, we're not just saying, hey, we're a diverse workplace. We have people from all races, all genders, all backgrounds, but then they're not safe when they're there. So a part of the wellness work is making sure that everyone feels safe, everyone feels like they belong. Finally, an importance of organizational wellness. I think that there's some theological importance here, of modeling Jesus's centering of wellness and work. Of course, Jesus's work was wellness, right? Making sure that people received healing. But as you read the story of Jesus, we see different moments in how he made sure he prioritized rest. He prioritized having smaller conversations. He prioritized making sure that other people were doing the work, not just him, preparing them to be able to do the work, and stepping away at times, right? We also have a Sabbath command that many people tend to overlook. Okay, we're not going to feel any shame today if we have not been practicing our time of Sabbath, which can look a number of different ways. But it's clear that if God made sure that in the work that God was doing in the creation story, we also have to make sure that we're paying attention to how we're working and making sure that we're centering the wellness and the rest within that process for ourselves and those we are working with and are working for us. All right. So we have the modeling of Jesus' centering. We have our Sabbath command. And our scripture this year for mental health and wellness that we're focusing on is Hebrews chapter 13:21. May he equip you with all you need for doing his will. And when we focus on this, I would love for y'all to take this forward with you as you are praying and thinking about and researching what your organizational wellness priorities will be for your organization, that you will also be leaning into what you're hearing from the spirit, right? Alongside the research, that you come to a place of deeper discernment and connection with your employees and your colleagues, so that you are addressing the actual needs of the organization and not just putting together a plan that sounds and looks good, right? Because we know when we don't address the actual needs, it's not going to work. In fact, there has been some research that for some organizations who offered trainings on resilience and stress management, there was actually a negative effect. not a positive one. And I would believe it is because the people who were receiving those trainings were probably very burnt out at the point where receiving a training on resilience or stress management was just not enough. Perhaps those employees actually needed a break, actually needed some more time off, needed to engage in some restorative practices and reconnection with one another, instead of having to sit in front of a computer and do one more training. And we all know how that can feel sometimes. So it is clear that in order to thrive, organizations must establish a culture of wellness. Instead of offering intermittent workplace wellness benefits, which might be a program, a prize, or a portal that they don't even have time to access because they have more and more building up on their plate, right? Or if you do this wellness program, here's the prize that you will get. And the prize is not even something that, again, something that they would really want, or respond to. I think about there's a very common meme or conversation that people have had that I've seen online over time about pizza parties, right? And how, when we were in school, maybe we got pizza parties for reading a lot of books or doing well in different ways, and how sometimes when organizations, when employees are saying, hey, we're struggling, we need some support, et cetera, they may be given a pizza party, and they might not even receive the pizza that they actually enjoy. So again, we're coming back to, what is it that people actually need? Are we listening? Are we paying attention? Are we connecting that with what we're seeing or what we're feeling inside about what sort of culture of wellness that you would like to create for your organization? So before we go into this positive, this wonderful culture of wellness, let's think for a minute about toxic workplaces. Have we been in them? I would love if people could share in the chat what comes to mind for you when you think about a toxic workplace, or even when you see these images that are on the screen. If anybody could just put a couple of words or phrases that come to mind for you when you think about workplaces that they're just not well, they're not centering wellness. What comes to mind? So I'll pause for a second and see if we get any responses in the chat if you are able to share. Okay. So when we think about toxic workplaces that do not honor time off, yes, there's usually something about the ways that people are not able to have access to their own time. Employees' experiences and voices are not heard or valued. Yeah, yeah, yeah. Okay. So I'm going to move along, and we're going to talk a little bit more about these toxic workplaces, which the World Health Organization looks at as some psychosocial work hazards, okay? Psychosocial work hazards. And those are grouped into a couple of different categories here. We have poor work organization, problems with work demands, time pressure, right? You got to hurry up and finish this, or things being put on you at the last minute, issues with decision making, issues with being rewarded and having recognition, being given support from supervisors, the job clarity, the job design, poor communication, right? So it's just not organized well. Then there's our organizational culture, a lack of policies and practices that are related to dignity or respect, for all workers. Okay. Harassment and bullying, gender discrimination, intolerance for ethnic or religious diversity, a lack of support for healthy lifestyles. We have command and control management style. So there's a lack of consultation, no negotiation available. The two-way communication is just not well. There's no constructive feedback. There's no respectful performance management. And then there is a lack of support for work-life balance. So how is our organization looking at work-life balance and creating the space for people to really live into the balance, all right? Really live into seeing their whole lives and managing their whole lives, right? Work is not taking up all of those aspects. When we think about that wellness wheel that we looked at for the individual, work is not taking up the whole pie, but the organization looks at understanding that the individual is more than just an employee. Okay. Managers, there's a quote here from Kelly and Kelly, who they have also done quite a bit of work around workplace wellness. And they say that managers should prioritize time for employees to connect in more deep and authentic ways beyond the to-do list and foster a culture that rewards psychological safety so employees can be vulnerable and lean on each other for support when it is needed. Okay, so again, looking beyond just the to-do list. We know how it feels when people are just looking at us for what it is that we can do and not for who we are. So we want to keep that in mind. So we'll move into talking about some healthy workplace well-being. A culture of wellness is what we want to walk away from in thinking about organizational wellness. Does our organization have a culture of wellness? So some of the signs of an organization that has a culture of wellness is the organization has made systemic changes. Systemic changes. So again, as we said earlier, not just offering some intermittent rewards. Here's a little program that we're going to give you, and then it's just one time in that whole year, and well-being is never focused on again. Or we talk about well-being in the context of the work that we're doing, right? Because I know everyone here is doing work with in the health and social service arena. And so you are doing the work of ensuring that people are well. But are you only talking about that in the context of the work that you do for other people? Does your organization have, I'm sure you have policies and practices for making sure that you're doing that work well for the people that you're serving. But again, do you have policies and practices and systemic changes that focus on your employees, that focuses on the work that you are doing? Because I also know that sometimes you might be working alone. You may be the only person at this point with the organization that you have developed or are developing. And so how are you navigating that space as well, and seeing yourself as your own employee and being a good boss to you, and having some systemic changes that are going to uplift your own well-being? So again, does your organization uphold systemic practices that fuel burnout and stress? That's a huge one, because a lot of organizations, they do uphold practices that fuel burnout, that increase people's stress. Meetings, back-to-back meetings, all right? Making it that people are constantly on the go and they do not even have an opportunity to sit down and eat. That wears on the body over time and increases stress. So we want to make sure that we're looking at the practices that we are engaging in that way. There was a survey last year on systemic policies, and the top three elements that came out of that from employees was that they wanted to limit work outside of typical hours. They wanted to implement a not a 4 hour, I'm sorry, a 4 day work week, that a 4 hour work week. While that would be a nice break, I'm not sure how much work we can get done in 4 hours every week. That might be a little bit more stressful, but a 4 day work week. And to incorporate mental health days in the well-being policies. So when you have these policies for time off, do you have sick days, vacation leave, floating holidays, and one of those categories being mental health days that are separate from sick leave, and making sure that people know that they can use that to take care of their mental health. Or, putting in your policy very clearly, this is for sick leave, which sick leave includes whether you are, however you may not be feeling well, right? What is it to say to your employees in that policy? This sick leave can be used for physical, mental, spiritual, emotional sick leave, which might feel really radical for some folks to say, like, spiritual sick leave. Sometimes your spirit might just be grieved about something, and that's not going to allow you to do the work that you need to do, but also you deserve to have the care that you need. So thinking a little bit more radically about how the policies that you already have can just be shifted to be more incorporative of the well-being that people need. I'm going to pause for a second because I see something in the chat here. Respectful performance management. Before going into a ministry, I worked for a time in an environment where I was so stressed by my supervisor's constant and unrealistic criticism that I ended up quitting before I had a nervous breakdown. Yeah, I am so sorry that you experienced that, and I hope that your work experience now is in a culture of wellness for sure. And that is a story that many people have, right? Being in a space where you are constantly experiencing that stress from whether it's your colleagues or your supervisor, and it breaks you down, right? It makes sense that you would have a nervous breakdown. It makes sense that you might have a depressive episode. It makes sense that you would have all of this anxiety in going into work. And we don't want people to feel like that. We want people to feel good. We want people to enjoy the work that they're doing. And so we have to have policies, not just programs, right? So policies, not just programs, so that even, at any point that you are no longer working at this organization, it's embedded, the initiatives that you have brought up and you started there, it is embedded in the organization. And every new person coming in knows this is our culture of wellness. And if you do not align with this culture of wellness, this might not be the workplace for you, right? And we have to be very real about that too, with the people that we are bringing in, and being discerning in our practices of hiring and sharing about the culture of wellness and providing people with the resources that they need to be able to engage the culture of wellness. So another sign, thank you for sharing, for the attendee who shared that. Another sign of an organization with a culture of wellness is the organization engages practices that consistently values their employees. So do you have celebrations and affirmations regularly? Or is it something that just, again, it's intermittent? Maybe once a year, in December, we say we're celebrating all the birthdays of the year. In December, the people whose birthday was in February, or we don't lift up the amazing things that people are doing in their work on a regular basis and affirming them. I see you and I love what you're doing, and we want you to continue. How can we support you in being able to continue the excellent work that you've been doing? The organization has a holistic awareness of the employee. They're not only concerned with the professional self. So a holistic awareness. We think back to that wellness wheel. We know that the employee has more happening in their lives than just work. Do you ever engage that with your employees? Do you show care and concern for other elements of their lives? Um, I saw recently a woman that I follow online. She shared that her job had actually, when they came together for, and I'm believing that they all may be deployed workers, but when they came together with each other, their job actually did a PowerPoint presentation in which they celebrated things that people had done over the past couple of months that were not related to work. And so this woman that I follow, she's also a filmmaker outside of her regular job. And they celebrated that she had completed a film. You know, they celebrated that some people had gotten married, some people had children, some people, you know, moved into doing something else, some people started a new hobby. And they actually put that up on the screen and celebrated that about their employees, which has nothing to do with their professional self. I'm sure that we could all feel that that shifts how you relate to the organization because you feel valued beyond just the work that you're doing. And you're learning something more about your colleagues, which is going to make you all be able to engage with each other a lot better, right? Being able to see one another beyond the professional self as the human. um, I think of how sometimes in our workshops, I'm reminding people, usually when we're talking about self care, that God wants you to be well, not just so God can use you, but because God wants you to be well, right? That is the basic imperative, the wellness, the wholeness, the abundant life, not just do this for me, just get this done for me. So we feel different. We feel good when we know that people see us beyond just this capitalistic framework, but that we are human. Um, and then the organization has conversations and activities that sparks creativity beyond the business aspects and daily work. So are we constantly coming into the meeting and just talking about the business and we need to get through the agenda and we need to get through the timeline and we need to make sure we're checking off these things and that's how every single meeting is? Or are there meetings in which you come in and you get to be creative together? You have conversation prompts that move the mind beyond the mundane, all right? You have activities that you do together. You know, to come into a meeting and to think of having art supplies on the table, having play and engaging that, opening up different parts of the brain, opening up, using different parts of the body in the work, which is going to spark the creativity, which is going to bring laughter, and it's going to increase people's well-being because it's not just, again, we're just checking off everything off the list that we need to do. The organization with a culture of wellness has policies and procedures to maintain well-being and hold leadership accountable to nurturing the well-being. So we've been talking about the policies and the procedures already. Policies ensure well-being practices are lasting and are not simply band-aids on broken systems. And I shared with y'all the statistic earlier on the resilience trainings not working for this group of people because it was just a band-aid on a broken system. You want to have what you create to last. And the policies also hold the leadership accountable to this being a continuing thing that they have to nurture about the culture of the organization. The organization also prioritizes models of care that, we said this, speak to the actual needs of the employees, is accessible immediately, is clinically effective for all cultures. So again, we're being mindful, who is working with us? How are we making sure that it's effective for them, whatever it is that we're offering, across all races, across all gender identities, across all abilities and disabilities, any aspect of a person's background, is the source, the resource that we're offering, is it going to be effective for all people? Also, it supports people at all hours of the day. Okay. And it builds a more mentally well workplace and protects against mental illness. So, we talked earlier about that psychological safety. We had our attendees share about the impact on their mental health, the stress that they were going through, right? We want to have workplaces in which people are being protected against having so much stress that it causes that mental, emotional, spiritual breakdown. So let's pause for a second here. And I want to give you an opportunity to reflect for a moment. What does your workplace culture look like? Does it promote healthy or unhealthy practices? Is there an unhealthy practice that you notice that you want to shift first? You want to make that a priority? And is there a healthy practice that you want to implement first, that you want to make that a priority? So I'm not sure if our chat, if people are able to use that, or if they want to put in the Q&A. But if anybody would like to share, just pause for a second here. Anything that comes up for you about what you might want to prioritize as you think about your own well-being culture. And I'll give us just another minute. Okay, give us a couple more seconds here. You don't have to share, but I just want to make sure that you have an opportunity right now to just reflect in your own space, to write down any notes that you would like to write down as well. So a few more seconds. I do see some answers popping up. I'll note those in a moment. We're going to give a couple more seconds to finish, about 20 more seconds. Okay, I do see a response here from one of our guests. I've had a few ideas while listening to this. Overall, I think we have a healthy work environment, but I intend to name our employees and their contributions in my weekly mini newsletter and plan a dinner with no training just to show appreciation and possibly gift cards to say thank you. Oh, yes, that sounds wonderful. That sounds wonderful to do. Yeah, I love that weekly, just, a weekly shout out of how people are engaging the work and how you want to celebrate, and just having dinner and enjoying one another is nice. Yeah. Okay. Proper boundaries from another guest. Proper boundaries are vital in talking about texting, no texting policy. Yes, instituting a no texting policy after a certain time, I think is very important. And as far as a suggestion on that, I think it's going to depend on the nature of your organization and the way that you all work. What the typical work hours already are for your organization. Is it, are people having to work at different times of the day or the different times of the evening that they would need to engage in texting? Is just going to, depend. I also encourage, we're going to talk in a moment about the steps forward with this, but I would encourage that be a question that you put on an assessment to your employees about texting and the sort of hours that make sense for your employees. Okay. So well-being requires, thank you all for sharing as well. Well-being requires the compilation of an intentionally crafted well-being culture whereby every member of the organization plays a role, not only in their well-being, but also a role in supporting those with whom they work. So this is an experience that's going to require the involvement of all people. So when we implement a culture of well-being, there is a four-step approach here. You are going to start with the assessment. Just as I just mentioned with the guest who shared about texting, that can be a question that you put on the assessment, asking your employees their thoughts about that. Because again, we want it to be intentional and inclusive of the people that it is actually for, this culture of well-being. So you can offer employee experience surveys. You can have employee focus groups or interviews. If you have access to any like overall medical and behavioral health claims, meaning you're not getting into we're not doing HIPAA violations, but perhaps you might have data if you offer healthcare in which they can say, X amount of money or X amount of people had to engage medical or behavioral health care, so that you would be able to see, well, maybe this year we had a high number, and the next year, once we instituted our culture of well-being and did some other initiatives, those numbers decreased. You can look at productivity and performance data. You can look at employee health and well-being assessment data. So being able to come up with some sort of assessment about what it is that you're looking to find out from your employees, asking them what is it that they want, what do they think is a culture of well-being, what would they like to see happen. And then you move into the strategic planning, including the organization's reason for investing in workforce well-being. What is your why? Making sure that you have the measurable goals and objectives that you would like to see, and you have your specific programs, interventions, activities, and supports that will be invested in to achieve the objective. Who works on this? Well, when we think about this, the entire organization, because you've done the assessment, they have invested in this planning process. So you're hearing from everyone. But when it comes to the planning, most organizations will develop a wellness committee, or just seeing who would like to engage in this. And you want to make sure that whoever the strategic planning team or committee is, that it encompasses the overall organization, right? That you have people, if possible, from different backgrounds, different generations. I mean, the list goes on, right? That it's not a team of people who are all going to come with the same ideas. We want to hear from all people. And then you will move into your program implementation. This is a coordinated approach, again, across different functions and departments in your organization, and the cross-sectional well-being committee is doing this work. However, all people in the organization are tasked with engaging, sharing about whatever program or whatever initiative you've come up with. Finally, you want to make sure that you evaluate what you have done. You want to evaluate multiple layers of your program implementation in this new culture of well-being. And you can develop those evaluation questions while you are moving through your strategic planning and consistently evaluate them over time. So it's not just a one-time of evaluation. We want to make sure that we're constantly going back. It could be every couple of months, but you can decide what would be best in that. Finally, when we think about an example culture of well-being, this culture of well-being will have initiatives and policies around physical health, mental health, financial health, social wellness, and work-life balance. So these are some, you don't have to have all of these for yours, but this is just an example of what a culture of well-being might have, right? They might focus on all of these, as well as having 2 to 3 signature offerings. So you want to make sure that you have at least one offering that individuals can access 24/7. That might be connecting to a program that has a portal I know we talked about portals earlier. We want to do more than just portals, but you might have a program that they can access, an app that they can access 24/7. Something that I've seen a lot of organizations do is have an account with like Headspace or Calm, those meditation apps that their employees have access to anytime that they need. There are other programs online. I know that a program that one of our disciples ministries has used is Learn to Live, which is about just mental health care. And so you can utilize those sorts of offerings that your employees can access 24/7. But you also need to have offerings that the organization as a whole or teams can engage together. So every time that teams are coming together or meeting, making sure that there are some offerings throughout the year, throughout the week, whatever the schedule is, that they are engaging together. So some elements to consider here before we close. As I just said, thinking about weekly, monthly, quarterly, yearly wellness activities and commitments. Okay. How might you schedule those in for your organization? Perhaps there are quarterly celebrations that you do. Perhaps weekly we come together and there's a particular wellness focus that we have in our meetings. Integrating wellness into the weekly schedule. This is so key. When we think about the schedule of meetings, right? You can schedule meetings in which you're setting well-being priorities together and you're regularly sharing. I see in the chat, Reverend Monica shared about our MBA soul care conversations and our soul care moments. That is a resource that we at MBA offer. And you could have an opportunity setting 30 minutes, a meeting during the week that's 30 minutes in which you all do a soul care moment together. We do have some soul care moment videos that you could watch. Just watch it all together, engage the process together, reflective questions, etc., breathing exercises, and doing that together and making that a part of your organization's plan, right? This is how you work. Making sure that you have breaks integrated into the schedule. Having a policy that we do not schedule X amount of meetings in one day. And that's a policy. Including wellness elements in the design of your office space. Do you have an area in your office that can be used as a calm space, a calm room, a sensory room? Do you have things that people can access in the space, right? Are you near a walkable space, or if there's somewhere that's nearby, would you have, a map or something for your employees to say, hey, there's a park a block over. You can go. We encourage you to go for a walk at some point during the workday. Those sorts of things that you have for your employees. Offering retreats. It can be a full day retreat. It could be a weekend retreat. It could be a half day retreat. Taking 4 hours out of the workday, making sure all of your employees are together and giving them some opportunities to just exhale. At MBA, we offer that. I've gone to a couple of our partner organizations to offer them half day, full day, multi-day retreats in which we're making art. We're talking about going beyond the professional self and just really giving the opportunity for people to be together and to laugh together. Offering workshops, making sure that if you have EAP, employee assistance programs, making sure that your employees know about those resources available to them, giving them access to online programs and apps, as I mentioned a moment ago. One researcher talked about a laughter committee. And so they have a committee at their organization that sends out funny memes, YouTube videos every single week. It's gonna just make people laugh, right? And so we also gotta be careful with that one and make sure that, again, we're assessing what's funny to people, right? And you can put that on your assessment. Also offering new policies. We talk about policies quite a bit. The last thing that I want to lift up to you all is when we think about knowing your organization's wellness needs. So in 2020, Nike had a do not work campaign, and this was after the murder of George Floyd. And I know quite a few organizations did the same thing, in which they gave their employees time off from work, right? Everything shut down. And I wonder how many organizations have continued to do an offering such as that, right? The question that I want to lift to you is, how do you continue to be discerning and aware of your organizational culture to provide offerings without the external pressure? Because we know that within the organization, there could be a lot of stress going on. There could be a lot of turnover. There could be losses. And it seems that that would be an appropriate time to maybe shut things down for a couple of days. And could you do that without it having to be something like the pandemic and the racial injustice that was happening in 2020? Can you be discerning and aware of what your organization needs? And how will you integrate opportunities into your regular organizational policies? Could it be potentially every year we do have these couple of days that we just take a break, and being okay with that, or maybe a quarterly thing? When we think about growth, we want to think about growth versus financial impacts, because some people will say, well, we can't shut down, we have to make money. And we know that yes, we have to do our work, but we want to move from seeing well-being connected to the financial aspect and see it as a human measure, not a financial one. And to measure our investment in well-being culture correctly by looking at the creativity, looking at the ideas, looking at the innovation, looking at the increased energy, instead of focusing on time, output, productivity, and dollars with our employees. And so just a few things to be thinking about, right? That you're paying close attention to what it is that your organization needs. The last thing here, our next steps. I encourage you to review your notes, to access our list of resources. I want to make sure that the resources that I have will be shared, that you comprise your organizational assessment. And if you need some help with that, please let us know. That you review the data that comes back from that assessment and determine your organization's wellness needs, and begin the process of researching the resources to incorporate in your organization that might also be right there in your community. Finally, you can attend our in-person organizational wellness workshop, which I know they will share a little bit more about in a moment, but that's going to go deeper on the topic and help you to create the toolkit that will work best for your organization. And so here's some sources. I'll make sure that you all receive those. And I thank you for being with us, and that you will continue to partner with us. And I will hand it over to Monica now.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Jocelyn. So much good information, you all. We want to remind you that we have been recording this, and it will be available on our website. Just give us a little time to do that. But we want to take a moment. Jocelyn answered or responded to a couple of questions and comments in the Q&A. But there was one other question that I'm going to field to you, Jocelyn, and I also may have a couple of thoughts from where I sit in our organization that to name alongside that. So the question is, and kind of two questions, so to speak, when creating policies, how do we ensure we implement these policies or principles, and who is responsible for creating them?
Yeah, I think it goes back to what I mentioned about the assessment, as well as the wellness committee that is created, and that they are multiple people are having a hand in those policies being created. You can also work with outside consultants who are constantly working with organizations to create policies, and making sure that they are implemented. I think in the creation of that strategic plan and those policies, having some elements there that talk about how we implement them, what happens when we are not implementing them, what happens if we fail, if we fail at this, right? And we know failure is not a bad thing. It's just an opportunity to learn something else about how we need to take it forward, take it a next step. But creating some other aspects of those policies for the accountability of those being laid out, and having some elements there about what happens when they're not, that will push it forward for those to continue to be implemented.
Yeah, and practically, from where I sit in terms of leadership, I jotted down a couple of thoughts around, your presentation and also this particular question. I think being mindful, for those on here who are leaders at any level, and at all levels, that together as an organization, together as a staff, we should take some time to define what wellness is or what wellness looks like for our organization. It isn't going to look the same for every organization. As you heard, there may be budget implications, there's needs, all of those kinds of things. And so that beautiful idea of having a wellness committee that Jocelyn mentioned, I think is really important, and ensuring that that wellness committee is diverse and speaks to or is represented by folks across the life of your organization or ministry is really important, so that you're getting as much or all of the feedback. And so that some of those folks, if you do an assessment, hopefully you will, that those folks are also representing, more than the response in the assessment, but how to flourish and understand that, right? Their experiences, what they value, gets to come to light. I think policies are always sticky because different policies get made at different levels of an organization. So you need to be clear. Is this something that a board, that your board has to be a part of, right? Is it something that your leadership team, or your executive leadership, or however your organization is structured? At what level do these decisions or policies need to be created? Who has decision-making power? How is your power able to be shared in those spaces, and being very clear about that? I think clarity and transparency around what is possible, who holds the decision-making power in those spaces. And people can hold that if they have clarity around it, if it's transparent, and they can be a part of that process. So I think that's one of the other pieces. And ensuring that the whole culture, from staff through board, understand and are cultivating a wellness environment, right? That we're all in this kind of together. I think some other practical things we named: having a diverse committee, clarity of decision making, be honest about what you have budget for or don't have budget for, right? Not everything requires a big budget. So as Jocelyn said, we have the resources of the soul care moments and conversations. You can use those, and you can create those within your own space. And we're always happy to support folks in being able to do that. The pension fund resource that she named. So there are resources out there that don't require you to go, to build a deep budget around that, but be able to begin to create spaces. I think one of our participants named how they might be moving forward in that space with their staff. But an appreciation goes a long way, and showing your appreciation, acknowledging when someone's done well or they're going through something, being present with them goes a long way as well. That doesn't mean you have to, I know we're small organizations. We're also, we're the church. So we want our money to go to mission. I would also challenge us to think about this as a part of our mission, right? Because we're serving one another in as much as we're serving the communities that we've been called to, or the calls that God has given us. And I think the last thing I would say is provide some regular reminders of what the organization already offers. We forget, because we don't live in the employee handbook or in the benefits handbook every day, that there may be some things. EPA, employee assistance programs, get overlooked so much because we forget that they're available. And in many cases, they're low cost or free if the organization is already providing that service. So an opportunity to consistently remind folks what's available, because we sometimes don't take advantage of it until we need it, right? We are reactive versus proactive, but we can keep those things at the fore of what's available to people. We're also, I think, helping to cultivate opportunities for folks to be well, and therefore our organization to promote wellness and organizationally be well. So those are just a couple of thoughts that came to me from where I sit in the organization.
You went on mute, Monica.
Thank you. Any more thoughts from you, Jocelyn? I don't have any more questions that came up in the chat that we didn't address. So any final comments before we close out?
No, just another thank you, and to remind everyone, you know, whatever assistance that you might need, we are available here. As you know, I close out. I hope that the mental health and wellness of your organizations are supported with compassion and care, that your creativity flourishes as you develop new policies and programs, and that you are replenished each and every day. Thank you all.